You know what I love about spreadsheets? I muttered to myself, adjusting my reading glasses as I reviewed the quarterly investment reports spread across my mahogany desk. They're more reliable than people. Numbers don't lie, cheat, or suddenly decide they want someone else's life. The irony of those words would hit me like a freight train about 30 seconds later. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Mira swept into my home office like she owned the place, which, technically, she did. Half of it anyway. Her designer heels clicked against the hardwood floor with that particular rhythm that meant she wanted something. After 12 years of marriage, I could read her footsteps like Morse code. "Calder, honey," she purred, perching on the edge of my desk in a way that would have been seductive if I hadn't noticed her checking her phone 3 times in the last 10 seconds. I've been thinking about our future. I saved my work and looked up at my wife. At 38, Mira Brooks was still stunning, the kind of woman who turned heads at charity galas and made other men wonder how a boring financial analyst like me had landed her. Her auburn hair caught the afternoon light streaming through our townhouse windows, and her green eyes sparkled with what I used to think was mischief, but had recently started recognizing as calculation. Our future? I leaned back in my chair, already sensing this conversation was about to take a turn I wouldn't like. What about it? I want a baby, Calder. I want us to start a family. She reached across the desk and touched my hand, her fingers cold, despite the warm May afternoon. I'm not getting any younger, and I think it's time. For a moment, my heart actually lifted. We'd talked about kids before, usually in vague, someday terms. The idea of little feet running through our carefully decorated home, of teaching someone to ride a bike or helping with homework, it appealed to me more than I'd ever admitted. I stood up and moved toward her, thinking maybe this was the moment our marriage would find its way back to what it used to be. Maybe this was the reset button we needed. But when I reached for her, Mira pulled back with a look of disgust that hit me like a slap. "Just not from you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "My ex is much more attractive, much more capable." The words hung in the air between us like toxic smoke. I felt something cold settle in my chest, but years of dealing with difficult clients had taught me to keep my expression neutral, even when someone was trying to gut me. "And much more foolish," I replied, my voice steady despite the rage building behind my ribs. Mira laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Calder, you think you're so clever with your little comments, but we both know the truth, don't we? You're boring, you're safe, you're the kind of man women settle for, not the kind they dream about." She slid off the desk and smoothed her skirt, already dismissing me. "Rafe texted me earlier. He's doing so well with his import business, making real money, not just shuffling other people's investments around like some glorified accountant." Rafe DeLuca. Of course, Mira's college boyfriend, the bad boy who'd broken her heart when they were 22. He'd recently moved back to town after a decade in California, and Mira had been mentioning him more and more frequently over the past few months. "I'm going out with Jules tonight," Mira announced, checking her reflection in the window. "Don't wait up." After she left, I sat in my office staring at the wall for a long time. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my desk, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear our neighbor's dog barking incessantly. I should have been hurt. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt something much more dangerous: curiosity. Mira had left her tablet on the kitchen counter, as she often did. She was careless with technology, always forgetting passwords and leaving devices unlocked. It was one of her many blind spots, the assumption that no one would ever think to look, because who would dare? The screen was still lit when I picked it up. Her message app was open, and Rafe's name was right there at the top of her recent conversations. I almost put it down, almost walked away and pretended I hadn't seen anything. But then I remembered the look on her face when she'd pulled away from me, the casual cruelty in her voice when she'd told me I wasn't good enough to father her children. I tapped on Rafe's name. The messages went back weeks, dozens of them, and they were explicit, graphically, painfully explicit. Details about their bodies, about what they wanted to do to each other, about how much better he was than her boring husband. But it was the recent messages that made me freeze. Rafe, can't wait to get you out of that house. We could have such a good life together. Mira, soon, baby. I just need to time it right. Calder's got everything tied up in investments, but I've been moving money around. My boutique's doing better than he knows. Rafe, how much are we talking? Mira, enough to start over somewhere nice, maybe California. I always loved it there. Rafe, what about the house? Mira, community property. I'll get half of everything. Plus, I've got some insurance policies he doesn't know about. If something happened to him. I stopped reading. Set the tablet down with hands that weren't quite steady. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to rob me blind and disappear with her ex-boyfriend. And that last message suggested she'd thought about more permanent solutions to the problem of my existence. I walked to our kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of the expensive bourbon Mira had given me for my birthday. The same birthday where she'd spent most of the evening texting someone and barely looked up when I opened her gift. As I sipped the bourbon, I felt something settling into place in my mind, a kind of cold, mathematical clarity that I recognized from my best days analyzing market trends and investment opportunities. Mira thought she was married to a boring, predictable man who would roll over and take whatever she dished out. She thought I was weak, naive, easily manipulated. She was about to learn how wrong she was. But first, I needed more information. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with, who else was involved, and what assets were really at stake. I opened my laptop and started making notes. Names, dates, financial accounts, property deeds. By the time Mira came home from her girls' night at 2 a.m, reeking of cologne that definitely wasn't mine, I had the beginnings of a plan. She found me still in my office, apparently absorbed in quarterly reports. "You're up late," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Couldn't sleep," I replied without looking up from my screen. "Just thinking about the future." "Oh." She hovered in the doorway for a moment, like she wanted to say something else. Then she shook her head. "Well, don't stay up too much longer. You look tired." After she went upstairs, I allowed myself a small smile. "You have no idea how tired I am, Mira, but I'm about to get a second wind." The next morning, Mira left early for her boutique, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like lies and expensive lip gloss. I waited until I heard her car pull out of our driveway before making my first move. Drew Castellano had been my roommate at Boston College and was now one of the best family lawyers in Massachusetts. More importantly, he was someone I trusted completely, a rarity in my current situation. "Calder Brooks, as I live and breathe," Drew's voice boomed through my phone speaker. "Don't tell me you're finally ready to dump that ice queen you married." "It's complicated, Drew. Can we meet today? Somewhere private?" The humor left his voice immediately. "How private are we talking? Like, I need advice private or help me hide the body private?" "The first one, I hope." We met at a small coffee shop in Cambridge, far from Mira's boutique and the usual haunts where we might run into anyone we knew. Drew looked exactly the same as he had in college, rumpled brown hair, expensive suit that somehow always looked like he'd slept in it, and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. "Okay, talk to me," he said, settling into the booth across from me with a large coffee and what appeared to be his breakfast, lunch, and dinner all wrapped into one enormous sandwich. I told him everything. The messages, the financial irregularities I'd started noticing, the casual way Mira had suggested I wasn't good enough to father her children. Drew listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on his phone. Jesus, Cal, he said when I finished. I mean, I never liked her, but this is next-level sociopathic stuff. Can she really take half of everything? In theory, yes. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets get divided fairly, not necessarily equally, but fairly. However, he held up a finger, there are exceptions. Adultery doesn't affect property division much anymore, but fraud, hiding assets, planning to leave the state with marital funds, that's a different story. Drew pulled out a legal pad and started sketching diagrams. Here's what we need to do. First, we document everything. Every message, every suspicious transaction, every lie. Second, we protect your assets, legally and preemptively. Third, we figure out exactly what she's been up to with this boutique of hers. What do you mean? Think about it, Cal. You said she mentioned moving money around, that the boutique's doing better than you know. But you've seen the books, right? You helped her set up the business loan. I had seen the books. Mira's boutique, Elegance, was doing well, but not spectacularly. Certainly not well enough to fund a new life in California for 2 people. So where's the extra money coming from? That's what we need to find out. But first, let's make sure she can't disappear with your life savings while we're investigating. Drew walked me through the process of protecting assets in a marriage that was heading toward divorce. It was more complicated than I'd expected, but not impossible. The key was to act quickly and document everything. One more thing, Drew said as we prepared to leave. You're going to need someone on the inside, someone who knows what's really going on at that boutique. I thought about that as I drove home. Someone on the inside. Someone who might have reasons to dislike Mira as much as I was starting to. That evening, I made an excuse about needing to drop off some papers at Mira's boutique. Elegance was located in the trendy part of downtown, all glass and chrome and carefully curated sophistication. It was the kind of place where a simple black dress cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sienna Martinez was working the evening shift alone. At 29, she was Mira's store manager and, from what I'd observed, the person who actually kept the business running while Mira flitted around playing owner. "Oh, hi, Mr. Brooks," Sienna said, looking up from the inventory she was counting. "Mira's not here. She left around 3 for a business meeting." The air quotes were subtle but unmistakable. "Actually, I was hoping to talk to you," I said, closing the door behind me and flipping the sign to closed. "About the business." Sienna's dark eyes sharpened. "What about it?" "I think my wife is stealing from her own company, and I think you've noticed some things that don't add up." For a long moment, Sienna just stared at me. Then she walked to the front window, checked the street, and pulled down the shade. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." Sienna had been keeping her own records, it turned out, not because she suspected anything at first, but because she was naturally organized and Mira's bookkeeping was sloppy. Over the past few months, she'd noticed discrepancies. "Cash sales that don't match the register totals," she explained, pulling out a notebook filled with her careful handwriting. "Inventory that disappears without being sold, and then there's the credit card." "What credit card?" "She has a business credit card that she uses for buying trips and networking events. But I've seen some of the charges. Expensive dinners for 2 at restaurants where I know she's not meeting vendors, hotel rooms, even some charges at a men's clothing store." Sienna pulled out her phone and showed me photos she'd taken of credit card statements. I started documenting everything when she began treating me like garbage. She used to be difficult, but lately, it's like she thinks she doesn't need to pretend to be nice anymore. "Why didn't you quit?" "Because I knew something was wrong, and I figured eventually someone would need to know the truth. I just didn't expect it to be you." We spent the next hour going through Sienna's records. The picture that emerged was damning. Mira had been systematically siphoning money from the boutique for months, using a combination of cash skimming, fake expenses, and outright theft. The amounts weren't huge individually, but they added up to tens of thousands of dollars. "There's something else," Sienna said as I prepared to leave. She's been getting deliveries here, personal stuff, expensive luggage, travel guides for California, even some legal documents that she had sent here instead of to your house. What kind of legal documents? I don't know. She keeps them in her office safe. But one day I saw a part of an envelope when she was opening it. It had a law firm's name on it, Hartwell and Associates. I knew that firm. They specialized in asset protection and offshore accounts. As I drove home, I felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Mira wasn't just planning to leave me, she was planning to disappear entirely with as much money as she could steal, hide, or legally claim. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me, and she'd pissed off the one person who knew all her secrets. When I got home, Mira was in the living room, curled up on our white leather sofa with a glass of wine and her laptop. "How was your day, honey?" she asked without looking up from her screen. "Productive," I said. "Very productive." She finally glanced at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty, suspicion. "You seem different lately," she said. "Different how?" "I don't know. More focused, I guess." I sat down in the armchair across from her, noting how she angled her laptop screen away from me. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About wanting a baby." Mira's fingers paused on her keyboard. "Oh? I think you're right. We should start a family. Soon." "Really?" The surprise in her voice was genuine. "Really. In fact, I think we should start trying right away. Cancel any travel plans, focus on each other, maybe even renew our vows." I smiled at her, the same smile I'd used when we were dating, and I was trying to convince her I was worth taking a chance on. "What do you think?" Mira's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, panic, calculation, and finally, a forced smile. "That sounds wonderful, Calder, but maybe we should wait just a little while longer. I have some business trips coming up and—" "Business trips?" I interrupted gently. "I thought the boutique was local." "It is, but I'm expanding, looking at locations in other cities. California, maybe." "How exciting. We should go together. I'd love to see what you're building." "That's sweet, but it would be pretty boring for you, just a lot of meetings with investors and real estate agents." I nodded understandingly. "Of course. Well, whenever you're ready to start our family, just let me know. I'm all in." After Mira went to bed, I sat in my office and opened a new document on my computer. At the top, I typed, "Project Mira, Timeline and Objectives." Then I began to plan my wife's complete and total destruction. The thing about financial analysis is that it teaches you patience. You don't make moves based on emotion or incomplete information. You gather data, identify patterns, and wait for the right moment to strike. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a student of my wife's deception. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, completely legal since both our names were on the title. I set up alerts on our joint credit cards and bank accounts. Most importantly, I started building a network of people who had reasons to dislike Mira as much as I did. It turned out there were quite a few of them. Jules Hartman had been Mira's best friend since college, the kind of wealthy socialite who treated gossip like currency and information like power. She was also, I discovered, getting tired of being Mira's unpaid therapist and emotional dumping ground. I ran into Jules, accidentally, at the Gallows Tap, the upscale bar where our social circle liked to gather for after-work drinks. She was sitting alone, nursing a martini and looking uncharacteristically subdued. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, gesturing to the empty stool beside her. "Calder, of course." Jules brightened immediately. "Where's Mira?" "Working late again. Seems like she's always working late these days." Jules's expression shifted slightly. "Yeah, she's been busy." I ordered a bourbon and waited. Jules was the kind of person who couldn't stand silence in a conversation. She'd fill it eventually. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a few minutes. "Sure." Do you think Mira seems different lately? More secretive? I turned to look at her fully. You've noticed it too? She used to tell me everything, every detail of her life, her marriage, her business. But lately, when I ask her what's going on, she just says everything's fine and changes the subject. Jules took a large sip of her martini. And then there's the money thing. What money thing? She's been spending like crazy. New clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to New York that she paid for in cash. But when I asked her about it, she got defensive. Said the boutique was doing better than ever. Maybe it is. Called her. I know what a successful boutique looks like. My sister owns 3 of them. Mira's place is nice, but it's not weekend in Manhattan nice. Not unless she's got some other source of income. I bought Jules another martini and listened as she unloaded months of frustration with Mira's increasingly erratic behavior. The canceled plans, the mysterious phone calls, the way she'd started treating their mutual friends like they were beneath her. I love her, Jules said finally. But sometimes I feel like I don't even know who she is anymore. People change, I said carefully. Not like this. Not this fast. Jules looked at me with something that might have been pity. I'm worried about her, Calder. And I'm worried about you. That weekend, while Mira was at another business meeting, I paid a visit to Oscar Brennan, the primary investor in Elegance. Oscar was old Boston money, the kind of man who valued discretion and despised drama but appreciated being kept informed about his investments. We met at his private club, a bastion of leather chairs and oil paintings, where conversations were conducted in low voices and handshake deals were still binding contracts. I'm concerned about some irregularities in my wife's business, I told him over brandy and cigars. Nothing criminal necessarily, but sloppy bookkeeping that could become a problem. Oscar's gray eyebrows rose slightly. What kind of irregularities? I showed him copies of the documents Sienna had shared with me, carefully redacted to protect her identity, but clear enough to demonstrate the pattern of financial mismanagement. This is troubling, Oscar said, after reviewing everything. I pride myself on backing solid, well-run businesses. If Mira can't manage her books properly... I'm hoping it's just inexperience, I said, but I thought you should be aware, in case you wanted to take a more active role in overseeing the investment. Oscar nodded grimly. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Calder. I'll need to schedule a comprehensive audit of the books. Of course. I'm sure Mira will be happy to cooperate. By the time I left the club, I knew Oscar would be taking a much closer look at Elegance's finances. And when he did, he'd find exactly what Sienna and I had already discovered. The next phase of my plan required getting closer to Rafe DeLuca himself. Rafe's import business was located in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. According to his website, he specialized in high-end European automobiles for wealthy collectors. It was the kind of business that sounded impressive but was difficult to verify. I showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, dressed casually and driving my oldest car, a 10-year-old Honda that I kept for errands. Can I help you? The receptionist was a young woman with elaborate nail art and a bored expression. I'm interested in importing a vintage Porsche, I said. Someone recommended Rafe DeLuca? Mr. DeLuca is with a client, but I can schedule you for later this week. Actually, I'm flying back to Chicago tonight. Is there any chance he could spare just 5 minutes? I'm a serious buyer. Money talks, even in reception areas. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Rafe DeLuca in his glass-walled office. He was exactly what I'd expected, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of carefully maintained stubble that took more effort than a clean shave. His suit was expensive, his watch was flashy, and his handshake was too firm and lasted too long. So, you're interested in a vintage Porsche, Rafe said, settling behind his desk like a king on a throne. A 1973 911 Carrera, if you can find one in good condition. Beautiful cars. Expensive, though. We're talking at least $200,000 for anything worth owning. I nodded like that was pocket change. Money's not an issue. I'm more concerned about authenticity and documentation. We talked cars for 15 minutes. Rafe was knowledgeable, I'd give him that, but there was something performative about it, like he was playing the role of successful businessman rather than actually being one. I'll need to do some research and get back to you, he said finally. Can I get your contact information? I gave him a business card with my real name and number. Let him wonder why that name sounded familiar. As I was leaving, I noticed something interesting in the parking lot. Rafe's personal car, a gleaming black Mercedes, was parked in the spot marked Owner. It was beautiful, pristine, and almost certainly worth more than his business could afford, unless he had other sources of income. That evening, Mira came home in an unusually good mood. She hummed while making dinner, smiled when I asked about her day, and even suggested we watch a movie together. You seem happy, I observed. I am happy. Things are going really well with the expansion plans. I think we're going to have some exciting opportunities soon. We? The business, I mean. Elegance. Sienna and I have been working on some new strategies. Interesting. According to Sienna, Mira had barely spoken to her in weeks, except to bark orders and complain about inventory. That's wonderful, I said. I'm proud of what you've built. Mira's smile faltered slightly. Really? Of course. You took a risk, started your own business, made it successful. That takes courage. For a moment, she looked almost guilty. Then her phone buzzed with a text message, and her attention shifted immediately. Sorry, just business stuff, she said, typing a quick response. No problem. Handle whatever you need to handle. But I was watching her face as she read the message, and I saw the flush that spread across her cheeks, the way her lips curved into a smile that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with anticipation. After she went to bed, I checked the GPS tracker on her car. Tomorrow's route was already programmed into the navigation system, a hotel 20 minutes outside of town, the same hotel where she'd been meeting Rafe every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. I poured myself a drink and sat in my office, looking out at our perfectly manicured backyard. In 12 hours, Mira would be in a hotel room with her lover, planning their future together with money stolen from her own business and our marriage. But she wouldn't be planning for long, because tomorrow was the day I started fighting back. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched my mood perfectly. Mira left for work early, claiming she had inventory to process before the store opened. I gave her a kiss goodbye and told her to have a wonderful day. I meant it. It would be wonderful for me. At exactly 10:30 a.m., I called Elegance. Sienna answered on the second ring. Good morning, this is Elegance. Sienna, it's Calder. Is she gone? Left 10 minutes ago. Said she'd be back around 4. Perfect. I need you to do something, and I need you to be very careful about it. What kind of something? The kind that's going to solve both our problems. 20 minutes later, I met Sienna at a coffee shop 6 blocks from the boutique. She looked nervous but determined, clutching a large envelope against her chest like armor. I made copies of everything, she said, sliding the envelope across the table. Credit card statements, cash register discrepancies, inventory reports, even photos of some of the personal packages she's been having delivered to the store. I flipped through the contents. It was damning. Months of systematic theft documented in meticulous detail. This is incredible work, Sienna. But I need one more thing. What? I need you to set a trap. I explained what I wanted her to do. It was risky, and it required perfect timing. But if it worked, we'd have everything we needed to destroy Mira's credibility with her investors and her social circle. Are you sure about this? Sienna asked. She's been stealing from you, too, I reminded her. Every dollar she skims is money that could have gone to employee bonuses, better inventory, store improvements. She's not just betraying me. She's betraying everyone who works for her. Sienna's jaw tightened. What do you need me to do? While Sienna returned to the boutique to prepare our trap, I drove to the hotel where Mira was meeting Rafe. I didn't plan to confront them, not yet. I just wanted to confirm what I already knew and maybe gather a little more ammunition. The Grandview Inn was the kind of place that catered to business travelers and discreet affairs, expensive enough to feel special, anonymous enough to avoid awkward questions. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:15, Mira's silver BMW pulled into the parking lot. She'd changed clothes since leaving home. The conservative blazer and slacks she'd worn to process inventory had been replaced by a red dress that hugged every curve and heels that added 4 inches to her height. Rafe's Mercedes was already there, parked in a spot that gave him a clear view of the entrance. He met Mira at her car, and even from a distance I could see the hunger in the way they embraced. I took photos, lots of them. They disappeared into the hotel and I settled in to wait. While I sat there, I made phone calls. The first was to Drew. "It's happening exactly like we predicted. Hotel meeting, change of clothes, the works. You getting documentation? Photos, GPS data, credit card records when she pays for the room. How's the asset protection coming?" "Almost finished. By tomorrow she won't be able to touch anything without your explicit consent. The prenup you guys signed is actually pretty solid. Her lawyer was either incompetent or lazy." "Probably both. What about the offshore account stuff?" "Hartwell and Associates is being very tight-lipped, but I have a contact there who owes me a favor. Give me another day or two." My second call was to Oscar Brennan. "Calder, I was just about to call you." Oscar's voice was grim. "I had my accountant take a preliminary look at those documents you showed me. We need to talk." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I'm calling an emergency meeting with Mira tomorrow morning. I want you there." "Me? Why?" "Because according to the business loan documents, you're listed as a co-guarantor. If the business fails due to financial mismanagement, you're on the hook for the debt." I felt cold fury wash over me. Mira hadn't just been stealing, she'd been setting me up to take the fall if her scheme collapsed. "What time tomorrow?" 10 a.m., my office." After Oscar hung up, I sat in my car staring at the hotel entrance and feeling something shift inside me. Up until that moment, part of me had still been hoping I was wrong. That maybe there was an explanation, a misunderstanding, a way to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But making me liable for her business debts while she planned to disappear with another man? That crossed a line I didn't even know existed. At 2:30, Mira and Rafe emerged from the hotel. They were laughing about something, holding hands like teenagers. Rafe spun her around in the parking lot, and she threw her head back with pure joy. I'd never seen her look that happy. Not with me. Not ever. They kissed goodbye, a long, passionate kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship, and went to their separate cars. I followed Mira back toward town, staying several cars behind. Instead of going to the boutique, she stopped at an upscale salon, then a lingerie store, then a jewelry shop. All purchases paid for in cash. By the time she finally arrived at Elegance, it was nearly 4 p.m. I parked where I could see the storefront and called Sienna. "She's here," I said. "Perfect. I'm ready." "Remember, you need to get it on the security camera." "Already taken care of. I repositioned the camera this morning." 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sienna. "It's done." I drove home and spent the evening pretending everything was normal. Mira came home glowing with satisfaction, humming under her breath as she cooked dinner. She was affectionate, almost giddy, touching my arm when she talked and smiling at private jokes I wasn't meant to understand. "You're in a good mood," I observed. "Just a good day at work. Sometimes everything clicks, you know?" "I do know. I'm happy for you." And I was in a way, because tomorrow everything was going to click for me too. Wednesday morning, Mira left for work with no idea that her world was about to implode. I arrived at Oscar's office 15 minutes early and spent the time reviewing the evidence Sienna and I had compiled. Oscar's office was old-school power, dark wood, leather-bound books, and windows that overlooked Boston Harbor. When Mira arrived, she was dressed in her most professional outfit, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who believed she was in complete control. "Oscar, thank you so much for making time to meet," she said, settling into the chair across from his massive desk. "I hope Calder didn't worry you with whatever concerns he raised. You know how men can be about business details." Oscar's expression was stone. "Actually, Mira, the concerns are quite serious. We need to discuss some irregularities in your financial reporting." I watched Mira's face as Oscar laid out the evidence, the discrepancies in cash reporting, the unexplained expenses, the inventory that seemed to vanish without corresponding sales. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation," Mira said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. "Sienna handles most of the day-to-day bookkeeping. Maybe she made some errors." "These aren't bookkeeping errors," Oscar replied coldly. "These are systematic discrepancies that suggest either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud." Mira's eyes darted to me, and I saw the exact moment she realized I wasn't there as her supportive husband. "Calder, what's going on?" "I'm protecting my interests," I said calmly, "since I'm apparently liable for the business debts if something goes wrong." "Your what?" The color drained from her face. Oscar slid a document across the desk. "The loan papers you signed last year. Your husband is listed as a co-guarantor. If the business fails, or if there's evidence of financial misconduct, he's legally responsible for repaying the full amount." Mira stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. I don't remember signing this." "Your signature is right there," Oscar pointed, "witnessed and notarized." I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to maintain control. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Oscar Brennan was not a man who tolerated being lied to. "I want a complete audit of the books," Oscar announced. "Every transaction, every receipt, every penny accounted for. Until that audit is complete, I'm freezing all business accounts and suspending your access to company funds." "You can't do that!" Mira's composure finally cracked. "It's my business." "It's my investment," Oscar corrected, "and I protect my investments." As we left Oscar's office, Mira grabbed my arm. "Calder, you have to help me fix this. It's just a misunderstanding." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. "Is it? Is it really just a misunderstanding, Mira?" For a moment, I thought she might confess, might tell me the truth and ask for forgiveness. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're wrong." "Am I? Then you won't mind if I ask where you were yesterday between 11 and 3? The question hit her like a physical blow. "I was working at the store." "No, you weren't. Sienna was at the store. You were somewhere else entirely." Mira's face went through a series of expressions: panic, calculation, and finally, cold anger. "Are you having me followed?" "I don't need to have you followed, Mira. You're not nearly as careful as you think you are." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her reassessing everything she thought she knew about our marriage and about me. "This isn't over," she said finally. "No," I agreed. "It's not." But as I watched her walk away, heels clicking angrily on the marble floor, I knew that the next phase of our war was about to begin, and I was ready for it. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday night. I was awake anyway, sitting in my home office reviewing financial documents and planning my next moves. When I saw Sienna's name on my phone screen, I knew something had gone wrong. "Calder, I'm sorry to call so late, but you need to know. Mira came back to the store tonight." "What do you mean came back?" "After we closed. I was in my car about to leave when I saw her BMW in the alley behind the building. She was inside with a flashlight going through the safe." I felt ice form in my stomach. What was she looking for? I think she was trying to destroy evidence. When I came back this morning, half the financial documents were missing, and someone had tried to wipe the computer hard drive. Tried? I back everything up to the cloud. She doesn't know that. Smart girl. What else? There's more. I think she knows we're working together. When she came in yesterday after the meeting with Oscar, she was different. Paranoid. She kept asking me weird questions about who I'd been talking to, whether anyone had been asking about the business. What did you tell her? Nothing. But called her. I'm scared. The way she looked at me. I don't think my job is safe. Don't worry about your job. I have a better offer for you. I explained what I had in mind. It was risky, but if it worked, it would give us everything we needed to finish this. Are you sure? Sienna asked. Trust me. By next week, Mira won't be in a position to fire anyone. Friday morning, I implemented the next phase of my plan. While Mira was at the boutique trying to salvage her rapidly deteriorating situation, I paid a visit to Rafe's import business. This time, I didn't make an appointment. I'm sorry, but Mr. DeLuca is in a meeting, the receptionist said when I walked in. That's okay, I'll wait. I settled into one of the leather chairs in the waiting area and made myself comfortable. After 20 minutes, Rafe emerged from his office with a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit. Mr. Brooks? Rafe's surprise was genuine. I wasn't expecting you. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd check on the progress with that Porsche. Right, the Porsche. Actually, I've been meaning to call you. It's proving more difficult to locate than I anticipated. That's disappointing. Maybe we could discuss it over lunch. I have some other business propositions that might interest you. Rafe's eyes lit up at the mention of business. I'd like that. There's a great steakhouse downtown. Perfect. I'll drive. Over lunch, I played the role of wealthy investor looking for new opportunities. I asked detailed questions about Rafe's business, his expansion plans, his financial backing. The import business is tricky, Rafe admitted over his third glass of wine. High overhead, lots of regulations, cash flow issues, but I have some investors who believe in the potential. Local investors? Some local, some private. People who prefer to keep their investments quiet, if you know what I mean. I did know what he meant. I also knew, thanks to Drew's research, that Rafe's business was hemorrhaging money and had been for months. His expensive lifestyle was being funded by something other than legitimate car sales. What about expansion? I asked. Ever think about relocating to a bigger market? California, maybe? Rafe's fork paused halfway to his mouth. California's an interesting market. Why do you ask? I have some connections out there. If you ever wanted to make a move, I might be able to help with financing. That's very generous. Can I ask what you'd want in return? I smiled and signaled for the check. Let's just say I believe in supporting ambitious people who aren't afraid to take risks. As we walked back to his car, Rafe was practically glowing with excitement. He saw me as his ticket to the big time, a wealthy benefactor who could fund his dreams of starting over in California with his stolen money and another man's wife. He had no idea I was the other man's husband. That evening, Mira came home in a foul mood. The boutique had been slow, Oscar was demanding daily financial reports, and the stress was beginning to show in the tight lines around her eyes. How was your day? I asked, the picture of concerned husband. Terrible. Oscar is being completely unreasonable. He's treating me like a criminal over some minor bookkeeping discrepancies. I'm sure it will work out. You're smart and capable. You'll figure out a solution. Mira looked at me suspiciously. You're being awfully supportive, considering you're the one who brought these problems to his attention. I was trying to protect us both. If there were issues with the business, it was better to address them before they became bigger problems. Us both? Her laugh was bitter. When have you ever cared about my business? You've always seen it as a hobby, something to keep me busy while you did the real work. That's not true. Isn't it? You think I don't know what you really think of me? That I'm just some trophy wife who got lucky marrying a man with money? The irony was staggering. Here she was, planning to rob me blind and disappear with her lover while accusing me of not respecting her. Mira, I've always supported your dreams. No, You've tolerated them. There's a difference." She stormed upstairs, leaving me alone in our living room. A few minutes later, I heard her on the phone, her voice low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. She was scared. Good. She should be. Saturday morning brought the final pieces of my plan into alignment. Drew called with news about Mira's offshore account activities. Oscar confirmed that the boutique audit had uncovered evidence of systematic fraud, and Sienna sent me a text that simply read, "It's done." The trap we'd set was simple, but effective. Sienna had left a large amount of cash in the boutique's safe, along with a note indicating it was payment from a private client for special services. The security camera was positioned to catch anyone who tried to access the money. At 3 a.m. Saturday morning, Mira had returned to the store and taken the cash. All of it was on video, but I wasn't ready to spring the trap yet. I wanted her to feel secure, to think she was getting away with it. I wanted her to make one final, fatal mistake. I didn't have to wait long. Sunday evening, Mira announced that she needed to take a business trip to New York. "It's a last-minute opportunity," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "A potential investor who wants to meet in person." "How long will you be gone?" "Just a few days, maybe a week, depending on how the meetings go." I nodded understandingly. "That sounds like a great opportunity. I hope it works out." "Really? You're not going to give me grief about traveling alone?" "Why would I? I trust you completely." The lie rolled off my tongue easily, and I saw Mira relax slightly. "Thank you. I know things have been tense lately, but I think this trip could be the solution to all our problems." "I'm sure it will be." After Mira went to bed, I called Drew. "She's running," I told him. "When?" "Tomorrow, probably. She's claiming it's a business trip to New York, but I'm betting she's heading straight for California." "Are you ready?" "More than ready. Is everything in place?" "Every asset is protected, every account is monitored, and I have a private investigator standing by to document whatever she does next." "What about Rafe?" "That's the beautiful part. He has no idea what's coming. When this all comes out, he's going to realize he's been planning a future with stolen money and a woman who's about to be charged with fraud." I hung up and poured myself a drink. Tomorrow, Mira would wake up thinking she was about to start a new life with her lover and my money. Instead, she was about to discover that her old life had just caught up with her, and I was going to be there to watch it happen. The next morning, Mira left early with 2 large suitcases and a story about catching a morning flight to New York. She kissed me goodbye at the door, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret. Called her, "Have a safe trip," I said, cutting her off. "I'll see you when you get back." But we both knew she wasn't coming back. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a GPS alert. Mira's car was heading west on the interstate toward the airport, but not the one with flights to New York. She was driving toward the regional airport that served private planes and charter flights. I smiled and reached for my phone. It was time to make some calls, starting with Detective Lasky at the local police department. "Detective, this is Calder Brooks. I need to report a theft." The Grandview Country Club's annual charity gala was the social event of the season, the kind of gathering where fortunes were displayed, reputations were made or destroyed, and gossip traveled faster than champagne through crystal glasses. It was also the perfect venue for Mira's final humiliation. I'd spent 3 days setting the stage while she was supposedly in New York, but actually holed up in a Los Angeles hotel with Rafe, planning their new life together with money stolen from her business and our marriage. The irony was that she almost made it. If she'd been content to just leave, to disappear quietly with whatever she could carry, she might have gotten away with it. But Mira's fatal flaw had always been her need to be seen, to be admired, to be the center of attention. She couldn't resist coming back for one last performance. "Ladies and gentlemen, If I could have your attention, please. The voice that cut through the elegant chatter belonged to Oscar Brennan, standing at the podium where the evening's charity auction was supposed to take place. Instead of the usual fundraising speech, Oscar held a thick folder of documents. I'm afraid I have some unpleasant business to address this evening. It concerns one of our community members and a matter of theft that affects several people in this room. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I stood near the back of the ballroom, watching faces turn toward the entrance where Mira had just appeared, radiant in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd flown back that afternoon, confident that her week away had given her enough time to cover her tracks. According to the private investigator Drew had hired, she and Rafe had spent the time setting up bank accounts, looking at apartments, and planning their escape route. They'd also made one crucial mistake. The individual in question, Oscar continued, systematically embezzled funds from a business in which many of you have invested, either directly or through charitable contributions. The total amount stolen exceeds $200,000. Mira froze in the doorway. I saw her scan the room, looking for allies, for escape routes, for someone who might help her. Her eyes found mine across the crowded ballroom, and I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast. Furthermore, Oscar's voice carried clearly over the shocked whispers, this individual attempted to flee the state with these stolen funds, abandoning both business obligations and personal responsibilities. This is ridiculous. Mira's voice rang out as she pushed through the crowd toward the podium. Oscar, I don't know what lies you've been told, but… Mrs. Brooks. Detective Lasky stepped out from behind a pillar, looking official and implacable in his dress uniform. We need to talk. The ballroom erupted in excited chatter. I watched Mira's face cycle through emotions, shock, panic, calculation, and finally a desperate kind of rage. Calder, she called across the room. Tell them this is insane. Tell them I would never… I can't do that, Mira, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet, because it wouldn't be true. I walked toward the front of the room, feeling every eye in the place tracking my movement. When I reached the podium, Oscar handed me the microphone. Many of you know me as Calder Brooks, Mira's husband. What you may not know is that for the past month, I've been working with investigators to uncover a pattern of theft, fraud, and deception that has shocked even me. I gestured to Sienna, who stepped forward with a laptop and a projector remote. Within seconds, the ballroom's large screen was displaying bank records, security camera footage, and documented evidence of every crime Mira had committed. The woman I married, I continued, has been systematically stealing from her own business, from her investors, and from our joint accounts. She used this money to fund an affair with her ex-boyfriend and to plan a new life in California. The security footage from the boutique played on the screen, Mira taking cash from the safe, Mira destroying financial records, Mira meeting with Rafe in the hotel parking lot. But the most devastating betrayal, I said, looking directly at Mira, was discovering that she'd made me legally liable for her business debts while planning to disappear and leave me to face the consequences. Mira's composure finally shattered completely. You bastard! You set me up! No, Mira, I just documented what you were already doing. Detective Lasky stepped forward with handcuffs. Mrs. Brooks, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. You have the right to remain silent. As the detective read Mira her rights, I pulled out my phone and made one final call. Rafe, it's Calder Brooks. You might want to turn on the news. Through the phone, I could hear the sound of a television being turned up, followed by Rafe's sharp intake of breath as the local news broke the story of Mira's arrest. That's right, I continued. Your girlfriend has been arrested for stealing the money you've been spending. And since you've been her accomplice in moving stolen funds across state lines, I'd expect a visit from federal investigators very soon. I hung up and turned back to the crowd. Mira was being led away in handcuffs, her designer gown trailing behind her like a broken dream. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, "I apologize for the disruption to your evening. However, I want to assure all of you that every stolen dollar will be recovered and returned to its rightful owners." The crowd burst into applause, not for Mira, but for justice being served. As the ballroom began to empty, Jules approached me with tears in her eyes. "Calder, I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad. Neither did I until recently. What will you do now?" I looked around the ballroom where I'd just destroyed my wife's life in front of everyone we knew. "I'm going to rebuild, starting fresh with people I can actually trust." Sienna appeared at my elbow, looking relieved but exhausted. "Is it over?" "The criminal part is. The divorce will take longer, but with her facing federal charges, it should be straightforward." "What about the boutique?" "That's up to you. Oscar and I have discussed it, and we'd like to offer you the chance to buy out Mira's share and run it yourself. You've earned it." Sienna's eyes widened. "Really? Really? You were loyal when it mattered, and you helped expose the truth. That's worth something." As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. The end of a marriage, even a poisonous one, isn't cause for celebration. But the relief of finally being free from lies, manipulation, and betrayal was overwhelming. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Drew's name appeared on the screen. "I saw the news," he said when I answered. "How do you feel?" "Tired, relieved, maybe a little sad." "Sad?" "She could have just asked for a divorce, Drew. We could have split everything fairly and gone our separate ways. Instead, she chose to lie, steal, and try to destroy me in the process. Some people can't help themselves. They always have to take more than they're entitled to." "I guess so." "For what it's worth, you handled this perfectly. You documented everything, stayed within the law, and let her destroy herself with her own choices." "Thanks. I couldn't have done it without you." "That's what friends are for. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow, you start building your new life." As I hung up, I realized Drew was right. Tonight had been an ending, but it was also a beginning. I walked into my house now, legally and completely, and poured myself a bourbon. Then I sat in my office and opened my laptop. At the top of a new document, I typed, "New Life Plan, Year 1, Objectives." Then I began to plan my future. A future without lies, without betrayal, without someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account to be emptied. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Mira in county jail. She was awaiting trial on multiple felony charges, and Rafe had been arrested in California, trying to board a plane to Mexico. The letter was full of apologies, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. She claimed she'd never meant for things to go so far, that she'd gotten caught up in a fantasy and lost sight of reality. She asked me to visit her, to consider dropping the charges, to remember the good times we'd had together. I read the letter twice, then fed it into my paper shredder. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. 6 months later, Elegance reopened under Sienna's management. The boutique was thriving, the investors were happy, and I had a new business partner I could actually trust. Mira was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Rafe got 7 years for his role in the conspiracy and for attempting to flee the country. I never visited either of them, but I did send Mira one final message, delivered through her lawyer. "You wanted a baby, Mira. Too bad you forgot who really held the keys to your future." I heard she cried when she read it. I felt nothing at all.